can strike at any moment. People talk of having 15 seconds to escape while a 13-meter tsunami-like wall of fire engulfs their street and house. Others in cities far away talk of choking in the street from the thick smoke billowing down off the mountains. During this period, my normal channels of two-way social media communication went into overdrive, and I was deeply immersed in a real-time, real-life story where I and others were major participants. I would learn to value and closely follow the story trails. So a typical day a couple of weeks ago, this is real. I looked out the lounge window. The sky was filling with a dark smoke, the smell of forest filling the house in the distance. A helicopter roars by. Obviously, I look out the window. Suddenly on my Galaxy, a Facebook friend, pops up a photo. You can see smoke and flames 2 blocks away. I immediately jump to the Rural Fire Services Fires Near Me app to see where the fires are and to see if it had been tracked, this latest one. On Twitter, another friend reported and actually copied an SMS emergency alert from the emergency services to evacuate immediately. I looked out of the window again, and the 2 helicopters now had water below them to drop on the fire. And then, in the background on the TV, ABC News 24 were cutting to a video of a news crew live on the ground as fires ravaged the area. The commissioner for the fire service appeared on TV and talked of 3 new fires at emergency level. The largest of them was on a path towards me, a day or so away. For others, it was too late to leave. You have to shelter in your homes. My Facebook stream started to update with photos sent from more trusted photographers near the scene, showing people running away from another blaze and massive smoke clouds behind them. I learned to value these Facebook friends in the next few weeks. I myself, the day before, had actually taken some photographs of the iconic scenery with these billowing clouds of smoke behind them. It was actually used by some of the emergency services to show the gravity of the situation. The social media messages just started to increase and increase. Photographs appearing everywhere, updates, status updates from everyone. I then received a knock on the door from the fire services. 2 or 3 people wanted to take me around the house and tell me how to protect it when the fire came. They used the word when, which was a rather ominous word to use. I then drove a few miles down the road to a community meeting. This was a physical community meeting. 4,000 people gathered together in an aircraft hangar to be told, basically, look, we haven't got enough fire people. You may be on your own. I chatted to a lot of the people who had had experiences of the fire many decades ago and even now, and it was an ominous sort of warning of what was to come up. We were told, as I said, to either make 2 decisions. We had to stay and defend or leave before 11 a.m. the next morning, because as far as the emergency services were concerned, potentially 30,000 people were threatened with this mega fire, as it was called. Yes, the term mega fire was used. To make things even more personal, a friend of mine suddenly popped up a picture on Facebook of him looking through the rubble of his burnt-out house from earlier in the day. He even had time to put on YouTube the point at which he'd given up protecting his house and trying to look after it. Okay, he had a fireman there. So there's lots of personal stories coming out. So that was Tuesday 2 weeks ago. It was my actual experience of one day in a pretty tough couple of weeks, which is still continuing. And I'm sure many of you here have experienced similar pervasive experiences. But to quickly finish the story of that, cliffhanger, we decided to stay and defend. We read the step-by-step defend plan, and like a rules-based game, we followed the instructions to make sure everything that we needed to do was in place. But this, of course, was not a game. If the worst happens, we may be burnt alive. But we had prepared the water tanks, the petrol pumps, escape routes, hoses, cleaned the debris around the house, filled the gutters with water, and so on. So we thought we were ready. The reason I spent some time going through that was really just to draw attention to what a pervasive experience is. I think one of the speakers yesterday talked about the difference between doing something very advertorial or living in a movie. So that was very much like living in a movie. The ingredients there to make that experience so compelling, obviously there was the physical, actual, real threat, but the ingredients that I used in my in that sort of story were two-way communication. We need to have that. We need to value the other players in that multi-platform experience. There needs to be friends. It needs to be personalized. It needs to have official channels to give it some weight and some foundation. Obviously, sharing personal stories, it's a two-way process. You have to share yours and receive them. It needs a game. It needs to be like a game. There needs to be rules. There needs to be a process to follow and an end game. A call to action. As I said, the biggest call to action on there was if you want to stay, you may risk your life. If you want to leave, do it before 11 a.m. That's a nice sort of ARG-like call to action, except that ARGs are often fictional. And of course, a nice big cliffhanger. The experience itself reminded me of one of the projects that came through my first labs in Australia, the Laboratory for Advanced Media Production, a project called Scorched, which won the International Interactive Emmy in 2009, so it's relatively old. But literally, as I was kind of tweeting out and Facebooking out, oh my God, what are we going to do? The fires are just around the corner, blah, blah, blah. Eleanor Cox from Firelight Productions, who produced Scorched, actually went, oh my God, you're living our project. And it was really interesting because we'd workshopped Scorched with them. And Australia's probably unique in having this sort of bushfire angst spread through its population. So when we were workshopping Scorched, we went, okay, we need characters on YouTube trapped in houses. We need people sending in videos of their experiences. We need the social network elements. We need a conspiracy. The conspiracy here being that the government was rigging water being such a commodity. And then that turned into a full-blown multi-platform TV experience with a tele-documentary and then a follow-up. I've just got a little bit to play, a minute or so, just to give you a taste of that.
Generate numerous forums and blogs, creating further engagement, and thousands of viewers correspond with our characters from the future. In the papers and on radio, a controversial debate grows about the issues raised by the project. As part of the project's overall objective to raise awareness about global warming and water scarcity, Scorched.tv also becomes a portal to other relevant online communities, sites and forums.
An Aussie driver events.
Scorched screens at prime time on Australia's premier broadcaster, winning the night for the Nine network. At the conclusion of the broadcast, the television audience are invited to come online, where the Scorched story continues.
Hi, is this Cassie? This is David Langmore. I need to speak with you about Deanna.
For 2 more weeks, viewers follow the online drama as Langmore, with Cassie's help, uncovers the truth and helps to bring down the government.
Yeah, they've been killing people for
Who's been killing people?
The creators of both the Scorched movie and the Scorched online experience spent over 4 years developing and researching the premise.
Okay. We're going to just have a quick break now before I get into the main part of the presentation, which is the state of the multi-platform transmedia industry. Matt, I think the MC mentioned, we are in this constant change, and are we getting towards maturation? When is the industry mature? So I thought we'd have a little look at some metrics. Imagine transmedia multi-platform is in itself a project. And we stop the project now, and we just have a quick look at where we think we are. Looking at some of the key measurements that more mature industries use. So for the film industry, of course, is pretty mature because it's over 100 years old, and TV is pretty mature, being 60 years old plus. But multi-platform, if you really think about it, is only about 15, 20 years old. So we've got some way to go. So we have to ask ourselves, where are we? So we're going to look at 10 metrics. The way I thought I'd do this is, because I didn't have a chance to build an app and we could all vote, I'm just going to say someone who's confident and thinks they have got a strong opinion about where we think we are on a scale of 0 to 10 on each of these categories can shout out. So anyone can shout out, and then we'll see how it matches with mine, because I'm just going to put mine on the screen. But let's see how quickly we can get through this. So I'll quickly, briefly explain each one. Language and grammar. So this is the terminology we use. At conferences like this, people hate using the word transmedia. Some of them use multi-platform, cross-media, and so on. So are we a Tower of Babel at one end of the spectrum at 0, or are we an industry-shared language and grammar? What do people think? Where are we? Just shout out a number, someone. A 2. That's... What happened there? Oh, there we go. Yeah, so it's pretty close to mine. I think we're a 3. At least we're starting to talk about the fact that we need to talk about it, which is great. Next one, multi-platform formats. So this is an issue with multi-platform in that we still haven't got to the point yet where we can almost put in a box the different types of formats. And I'm not talking about things like just webisodes or casual games, but some of the ones on the right there, that we're starting to see. So situated documentary, everyone knows what that is. Well, perhaps you don't. But that is a format. So when you say, hey, I'm doing a situated documentary, people know that this is something where people are traveling around the street looking at documentary type material. So someone shout out, are we formless, pretty ill-defined, or are we productized? It can be packaged in a box. Where do we think we are? 4. All right. I think we're doing pretty well. I think we're starting to develop a taxonomy around productizing multi-platform, but I agree, I should have marked it lower. Just as an aside, I did a little spoof, ARG in a box. Whoops, did that disappear? Put it back up. Which do we need to get to this point? Because the film, TV industry are packaged. You're packaged on DVD, and nowadays, of course, you get it all online and delivered on broadband. But it's something that you can just do whenever you want. A lot of multi-platform services tend to be these appointment to use and disappear quite quickly. So the ARG in the box is the idea that a transmedia producer can walk into a shop, buy an ARG, and they've got all the materials they need to run one. Business models. This is something close to a lot of people's hearts. Where are we? Are we cap in hand? Yes. Are we sustainable and formalized? Who said? 5. Well, that's pretty close. Well done, that person. Was that Brian, by the way? Yes. Oh, right, okay. Yeah, so we are getting there, and I think they are maturing, which is great. Here's a really important one, which is related to business models. Where are we on multi-platform metrics and data? And we finger in the air a bit like the TV industry. We think there are 20 million people watching it.
Are you talking about the amount of data or the ability to analyze and use the data?
This is the ability to track and monitor and measure what you're doing, which in itself, a 6, yeah. I actually think we're doing pretty well. If you look at the broader broadcast multi-platform industry and the digital agencies, the ones that are doing what I would call sort of ground-level multi-platform, it's all about measurement. It's all about getting the data and understanding how things are performing. Level of interactivity is another metric. Are we in the world of pushed interactivity? And I actually use the word broadcast interactivity quite a lot. This is where people say, I'm doing a multi-platform project, and you go, what is it? Well, we've got these videos, and you click them, and they play on the web, and then you click another one, and it plays another bit. So I call that broadcast interactivity, through to really immersive game-like at the other end of the spectrum, where people are drawn into it, immersed, and compelled to move forward. Where do you think we are generally? I know it's really hard. If it's a game, it's obviously game-like. 7, I think, I'm a bit pessimistic. I think we're a 4, but 7... Yeah. Integration with social media, I'm going to skip through these next ones. Are we antisocial or participatory? 6, someone said 6, brilliant, well done. In fact, this is the way it's going to work. I'm going to listen to you and then I'll just say the one that matches mine. Is it an so this is integrated production. Are we making multi-platform in the right way? It's really, really important. Film, TV, and games all have this regimented production process. Are we doing it in an effective way? Is it an afterthought, or is it a parallel process? 3. So the average was about 4.5 there. So yeah, you can see where I'm going with this. Yeah, and again, it depends where you come from. If you're in the broadcast sector, it's a very regimented process. I mean, it's literally locked down. If you're in the sort of, towards the ARG end of the spectrum and indie multi-platform production, it is a little less defined. Job roles and definitions. So this is the words we use, and it's really important for an industry to have good, well-defined job roles. Are we at the Tower of Babel? No one knows what the hell the job title means. Or are we locked down and it's a really, really defined tight role, which we can start to attach salary structures to, and everyone knows what that person is doing? Where do we? 2. Okay, it's interesting. You're actually a lot lower than me. And again, I'm perhaps addressing a slightly more industry level of this, but yeah, I think there are good job roles coming along. I saw the word convergence director the other day in a major company, which is brilliant. Story architects, experience designers, these are all coming along. The ability, so I'm guessing there are aspirational or actual practicing multi-platform producers here. So in terms of the ability to be trained and to go somewhere where you can be taught the best process and the best methodologies to create fabulous stories and then map them across platforms, where do we think we are? Do we think there's no training out there, or do we think it's everywhere and we can't get away from it? 7. Oh, okay. 2, brilliant, well done. I think, yes, we are very, there's not enough training out there. I think there's lots of training, in the mechanical skills of using tools, but I'm pretty sure across the world, on average, there's not really enough in methodology training and process training. Where do you think the audience think the industry is? Or what do they think they see multi-platform as? Do they see it as a marketing exercise, or do they see it as truly unique storytelling? I remember this is an average across all of the services out there, not the 1 or 2 brilliant ones that we've seen at this conference. 4, 3, brilliant, yes, I agree. So I'll finish that, and perhaps it would be worth looking at that next year. Perhaps I'll put it on the web and it'll become an industry metric where we are overall. So I'm going to move into the sort of middle, the core part of the presentation, which is about methodology and process. We often see at these conferences lots of fabulous services, and the speakers sort of talk through roughly how the project came about. But each person has their own methodology and way of doing things. And it's been great that the theme of this conference so far seems to have been this user-centric design strand. People thinking really hard about designing services that people value, which you can then consider to monetize. If it's not of value to the user, there's no business model, basically. I think, everyone knows about these sort of economies, the discussions about this. For hundreds of years, we've been in a commodity or goods economy, swapping physical products. We then, in the 80s and 90s, moved into a service economy, where services were the key. An experience economy, often referred to as the sort of Starbucks experience. We pay for coffee in a fabulous coffee bar, so it's an experience. Nowadays, with so much information and media available to us, it's an attention economy. It's about what can producers do, particularly multi-platform and other media, to draw the attention of the user to their product. I think we're moving into a trust economy now. I actually coined the term trustonomics on Urban Dictionary a few years ago. A trust economy meaning that the most valuable thing to media and storytellers is going to have to be a trusted community. People who will, go to you and expect from you wonderful services, and they will, that's where the money will come from. People want to go on a magical mystery tour, but they do have to trust you as the bus driver. So that's really just a quick intro to this next section, which is looking at the process of multi-platform production. I fiddled around with this presentation quite a lot to try and make it a bit more focused on frameworks and structures. And as I discussed, as Brian put me on the spot yesterday saying, Gary, you have 30 seconds to describe the process, go. I thought I'd try and extend that because I think it's important that we do have a process. My partner Laurel Patworth and I created this slide 6-7 years ago, actually looking at the social media campaign. When social media suddenly appeared on the scene in a big way and everyone was going, what's social media? We broke it down into this process, and the most important part for me when we were devising this simple sort of 5-step process was involve the first element. Really, really important, and I'll go through that in a second, that producers actually try the services they're making something for. I know it sounds obvious, but I've worked with a lot of projects where producers come up to me and says, I'm going to do a social game with this brilliant story. It's about dinosaurs that invade the planet, whatever. And it's going to be a social game. Which social games do you like? Oh, I've never been on one. I've never tried it. Okay, so, that is a big issue, and I see it all the time. People creating games that have never played games, people creating games that don't use a designer, as has been mentioned, and so on. So I'm going to talk about this sort of, quickly whiz through this these sort of steps in detail. So immerse yourself, live in the community, have intention, story build, then design experience, then finalize the platforms and the business models, then produce, then release and adapt being change it and how it's being used, and then rinse and repeat, going around this cycle endlessly. So the first one is immerse yourself. To quote McLuhan, societies have been shaped more by the nature of the media by which people communicate than the content. And I think we're sort of still seeing that. I did this map a few years ago, looking at the state of the industry in the sort of 1970s, the media industry, with these very scarcity-driven platforms. TV was really difficult to get into. Getting a film on the screen was difficult. Now, of course, it's moved into a more fragmented world of media and very complicated for producers to decide where they want to tell their stories. But immersing yourself, and this is step one, immersing yourself and living these media is really, really important. I liken it to being a tourist, explorer, traveling around. You need to be exploring the game worlds. I think Caitlin mentioned yesterday EVE Online, which I haven't heard people mention for a while, but that's producing a service for EVE Online. You need to understand how it works. You need to have tried World of Warcraft if you're thinking about doing an MMO. Obviously, you need to have a Twitter account. People still don't have Twitter accounts, and yet they talk about we're doing a social TV service or we're doing a social media campaign. Blogs, understand how the blogging ecosystem works, understanding how the importance of influencers and finding the right blogs for your particular niche, the stories that you're telling. You need to be an explorer. You need to be that storyboat traveling around each of these and immersing yourself in it and understanding it. I know it's difficult, and it's for time-poor professionals, it is a problem. I'm not saying that living in these across the platforms and educating yourself about them is more important than story, but I think you need to have that in the back of your mind when you're developing stories. The same is with true technology. We often hear at these conferences, story first, story is really important, story is king, and then what? But to develop stories, you do need a sense of the technologies available to you. You need to be aware of services that have already run on those devices. Really, really important. There's no, again, I get people coming to me who've spent 3 years developing a project, and I go, it's there. Have you not checked the web recently? Because they've not done the research, they've not lived in those platforms. Experiential entertainment, as just a quick video just to move away from me droning on for a while, I think it's really important, the way that we're telling stories across in the outside world. And this is just a quick taster just to fill in sort of space here. Okay, I'll cut that one short. The reason I showed that was because on some of the project labs that I run and when consulting with people, they sometimes just don't have a real strong idea of where's the best place to tell the story. A good example is Warwick Thornton, who's one of, I don't know if people know him here, filmmaker, Samson and Delilah, and some of the big films in Australia. He's an indigenous filmmaker. Him and his team were struggling for 2 or 3 days. In fact, Brian was on, you were on this lab, weren't you? Yeah. Struggling for a few days to sort of come up with a core multi-platform concept. And it wasn't until I did a short, literally 10-minute presentation on augmented reality and simple marker-based things like the avatar example here, that he suddenly went, oh my God, this is a story about indigenous ghost stories, and we can put those ghosts in people's hands and people's houses and the end of the bed. And he got really excited, and it was this spark that came into his mind. And it's that marriage of the story and this and the experience which I'm really fascinated in, finding the core multi-platform exposition. Here's a little sample of The Dark Side, which is I think just about to be released on ABC. It's a film and in the cinemas.
Lost the skull through my body. I rebuke you in Jesus' name.
Was that ye then?
No.
Oh, I thought I heard something.
Okay, the other aspect of The Dark Side I didn't mention was that there was a user call to action as well before the film, which is sort of traditional social media participatory components of multi-platform now, which is asking people to send in their ghost stories, and again, thousands came in. The second element of this process, I think, is live in the community. So as well as understanding the platforms and the services that have existed, it's build or find your trusted community. Become part of it, influence it, build data around it, understand the behavior and do the research. And this is all before, in my mind, you should be starting to think about creating content for your user community. Again, looking at that chart, this involve element becomes before the create in pure social media campaign. But with the with the tsunami of content available and being shared across media at the moment, it's really, really important that you immerse yourself in them. Find out not just the raw numbers, and this is a counter I did about 9 years ago, I think, showing the real-time data. So this is data from more or less now, and that's the speed that media is being shared. You need to see beyond the numbers. You need to get in there and find out what people are doing. What are their behaviors? Yourself, as a producer. You can rely on researchers, sure, you can use agencies to do that, but there's nothing better for a storyteller and a multi-platform producer to be in there and watching it. Fan fiction, we've talked a lot about. Fan fiction is often bigger than the core properties themselves in terms of the amount of content available. Mobile behavior, this is something that I find out when I was the EP, that we discovered when I was the EP at ABC. We created a pretty basic game review app based on the Good Game TV series, which is phenomenally popular in Australia. In 1 year, there were 500 reviews on the desktop site of games. So basically, there's something there that says, what do you think of this game? 500 reviews is absolutely nothing. So we released the mobile app in April 2012, and staggeringly, in the first week, there were 31,000 reviews. So that behavior just showed that it was all about accessibility. It was obviously all about a lot of people spending more time on mobile web than on desktop web. But it was also the fact that it was the community aspect that started to, the mechanic of the community and the gamification inside the reviews that drove that. You also have to keep your eye on lots of stats. Usually my presentations are very stats heavy, but this is just a simple one, basically showing when you're starting to think about a multi-platform ecosystem, where people are spending most of their time. You need to be researching that. And they're pretty old stats, and it's staggering how much tablet and mobile time is increasing. And I think in some territories it's now bigger than time on TV. But you also need to, I think, to develop really unique, interesting services, you also need to immerse yourself in them wholly. And by that I mean you need to be in there as a, siren's going off, as a key protagonist. So I chose this video as an example. It's sort of an oldish one, but to me it encompassed or encapsulated the message here, which is for you to really have an impact in the community and to be trusted by them. You need to be in there with them, grafting and creating new types of experiences. So this is a typical example. Second Life, a social virtual world. I created a lot of the early, some of the big Australian services in there, branded entertainment, if you like. But I came across and I got involved in live performance in there. So there were lots of people playing avatars who would do plays, they would do performances and so on. So I often, and because I'd done a lot of machinima, this is filming games in progress and things, I was asked to shoot a lot of these, a bit, just like the real world. So there were 20 virtual performers performing this piece in real time. Remember, this is live. This isn't an animation. And they had production assistants doing all the props and various other things. There was a crew, if you like, 4 people filming, avatars filming the event and streaming it to a larger audience outside the game world. There was the machinima filmmaker, myself, who was collecting footage to edit together later. There were 50 avatars just sat in the audience, a bit like you are now, watching this live avatar performance. And as I've said, hundreds watching on the stream. So it was a fascinating behavioral thing that sprung up inside a virtual space. And we see a lot of this behavior, on Facebook, on Flickr, people creating new ways, new forms, new multi-platform forms inside these services that should really inform you as a producer. Here's a little taste of that. Okay, it gets a bit racy there. The point is that was live performance. That was like theatre in a virtual world, which is, a kind of an extreme example of the behaviours that are going on. I'm going to quickly whiz through these now so we can get some questions in. I've got a few more examples to show. Have intention, we've mentioned this a lot. The third stage is once you've understood the world, once you're in the community, is then to start to think of the messages that you should deliver into that community. What types of stories will they most appreciate, particularly the niche ones? What's going to be most value? Deliver it with passion, authenticity, and create personas. I'll talk about that in a second. I think there's two types of stories. One's told at you and one's told with you. In both cases, you really need to, thank you, have your intention really sorted out. Who's it for and so on. Where are you on this meter? Are you sort of pure marketing? Are you integrated storytelling, unique integrated storytelling, or is your intention somewhere in the middle? There is an importance of creating personas. Personas are used in the industry. No one's sort of mentioned them here. I've heard at the conference several times that we talk about, really think about your users and what they do and understand them. But actually personas are used by the advertising industry and a lot of the broadcast industry all the time. Why do we need them? It's key concept decisions can be made for these users. A persona is really a story about a user, or it's a user bio, if you like, and often you have in a broadcaster 6 to 10 personas that represent individuals across that are key users or watchers, audience. It focuses the team on targeting specific users. It gives clarity about the core items to put your energy into, improves communication, and also makes the resource planning much more streamlined. So typical personas are usually a picture of some fictitious person with a fictitious name, and you've gone into the age, what that person does, what devices they use, what's a typical day in the life of that person, and then how you're going to reach that person. Multi-platform producers need to do this a lot more than that they are doing at the moment. Story building, 4. So now you're kind of prepared. You've done the first 3 steps. You're now ready to do some story building. And I'm not going to go into story process. I think everyone is across this. We obviously need to have good storytelling. We often say at conferences like this, story is king. We really need to think about going back to the fundamentals of storytelling. But at the end of the day, you've got to be a good storyteller. People often forget that. It's not just about focusing on the story. You've got to be a good storyteller, or else it'll come to naught. Most importantly, while you're doing the story, I think it's really, really important that you consider the things that users are going to do. That's the problem. It's the narratology, ludology debate, which is we create this fabulous narrative, and it's wonderful, we've constructed it, and then we go, oh, what can people do with this? I think as you're creating the story, the doing is really, really important. And this is kind of indicative of this project, which is actually being broadcast today, the first episode on ABC in Australia, and it came through the lab in 2011, one of the StoryLabs. And we had this situation where the script was still being written for the series. It's aimed at kids. And we basically said, what are the possibilities here? It's a fantastic story of kids that get lost in a parallel reality, a parallel sort of world, when they go through the forest and they come back to the city and they find out that they're invisible and they're seeing the world playing out around them and they've got to work out what's going on. So this whole parallel dimension came up. What can we do here? How can we have that parallel dimension represented by an interstitial game? So this was as I said, a couple of years ago when this was being conceived. What can we do in a game that will influence the story of the TV and then back into the game and so on? So what we have here is a story that gets to a certain point. The kids are finding objects in the TV episode, which then appear in the game, and you, as part of the game, you have to quest. You have to go there and push these objects through the vortex or the wall, if you like, into this real world. When the TV show starts again, those objects have transferred themselves into the real world. Here's a little taster of this show, which is just about to air in Australia.
Kill a storm.
Run! Run! Faster!
Can you tell us how to get to Bremen?
Everyone who knows us, has forgotten us.
Dad! Can I help you?
Mum?
Sweetie, I'm not your mum.
You've got me confused, mate.
There's something going on here.
It's not just that we've been forgotten. There are whole new lives, like a different version of the same reality. Who are you?
Someone has to remember us.
We should stick together. Whatever's going on happened to all of us.
What was that?
What was that? Run! Run! Jake, come on, Jake, just open the door. I can't.
Okay, so just for time purposes, I'll move on. So that was called the Nowhere Boys. I also think from developing story worlds, you need to keep an eye on reality. This is reality. This is, people having to wear glasses because they're being recognized by systems on the street. In other words, the Minority Report sort of story mythology is already upon us, and we're moving into some very dark spaces. This service here is where criminals can be recognized on the street. It's an app for your phone, and you can basically find out who's a criminal walking around you. And so on, and Google Glasses and these types of things. I've only got a few minutes left, so I'm just going to probably focus on the design experience side, because I think this is the most important bit. This is where everything comes together as an experience designer. You've got your story, you're thinking about the platforms, you're thinking about the business. Lots of methodologies for doing this. I think, I use these sorts of charts to look through the possibilities of where we can deliver fragments of stories to when I run the labs and various various curricula as well, and even with in broadcast professionals. I use a lot of these charts to sort of not dictate where the story's going, but certainly have a procedure for it. The most important thing is the game mechanic for me. It's critical. This is the doing. If you don't really think through what the user is going to do with your story, you'll find it really, really difficult to engage them, of course, and then they won't find it of value, and there's no business model. So your role as a professional multi-platform creator is to motivate the use. Do your research, look at the game mechanic, information on the web, understand how it can work and what its benefits are. Select the platform and the business models. Let's talk about reach, baby. So these are figures currently, 2013, a month old, of the platform numbers. It's really, really important. If you're thinking about territorial TV and so on, that's different. But if you're thinking about a global market, you need to know that Netflix is only 40 million, Vimeo 100 million, SoundCloud, Tumblr, blogs, they become interesting platforms because they're in the 200 million. Then we start to see the big boys on the block with Google, 41 million and climbing very, very fast. Then the big game in town of social media, we've got Twitter at 500 million, YouTube at 1 billion, and then, of course, the poster boy of social media, Facebook, at 1.2 billion. These should help you think about where you should place your service in terms of having the most reach. Then you have to think about the platform story, the story of which of the platforms growing. Tablets are growing tremendously at the moment, 400 million. Smartphones, 1.3 billion. There's more smartphones than Facebook users. And computers are dropping dramatically. But still the big platform, of course, is TV, 3.1 billion, but TV split into lots of different segments. So, you have to decide, are you on the left side of this platform chart where you're going to deliver your service, or are you looking at the complex world of TV? TV itself is a distribution platform, and I haven't got time to talk about that, but the form TV, the form of video content, could be delivered on any of those other services. Then you have to do a lot of mapping, schematics, understanding how the flow of the experience is going to work, and finally start to identify, well, you would have identified already some of the business models, which you can't see there, but affiliate business models, intermediary, data mining, through to advertising, sponsorship, and all the other familiar ones. The production. This isn't, I haven't got enough time to do this, but when I was asked by Screen Australia to help out the industry in Australia, one of the things I thought was most useful was to come up with a structure by which people who have already devised the service, so they've already worked through everything, could then map it onto a document to help the production. Then you need to find the right people. Decide if you're not any of those on the left. You have to decide if you're an architect, a user experience designer, are you an expansive story world builder? Do you live and understand the new platforms? Are you a team leader? Are you very honest about your goals? All of these things need to be taken into account. Then and I'm really whizzing through this, but the multi-platform production process, TV, multi-platform games, are very much three main delivery devices, delivery platforms, and we have to think about how we can produce them all together. The multi-platform component in the middle is extremely complex because you are delivering multiple platforms. Games and TV on the left and right are very mature. So I'm going to start to wrap now. Got a minute left. Let's wait for this. And some of the tools. So these last two are pretty quick. Release and adapt. In the multi-platform world, everything you make is organic, it's changing. You need to build it so that once you do release it, you can modify the experience. Build the trust, be responsive, and listen. Then you can rinse and repeat. Then you can go over and around this cycle again, and it's really important. So the last slide, a quick recap. Once you've got a great story world treatment, you need to consider these things before you make it interactive. Who are your users and what are their behaviors? Who do they need? Why do they need it and think they want your product? Where, how, and when will they get it? What will they do? Really important, the game mechanic. And do you have your own clear objectives, key performance indicators? What do you want to learn from delivering it? Are you prepared to fail? And finally, because funding is really important, there are some really good criteria on the Australian funding scene. I'm sure it's the same here. Is your product original? Does it have a market? Do you understand your users and is it measurable? Is there a business here? And are you realistic about the team's schedule and budget? So just to finish on, and I don't know if we've got time for questions, but most importantly, find your own multi-platform voice. Start to think of services that reflect you. Quest for good training and mentors. Find people who talk about the best ways and the best methodologies, and live it, create it, and adapt it. These slides will be available on my SlideShare.